Hi everyone, welcome to today's event. I'm really glad that you can all join us today. We're just gonna let some more of people in and then we will begin. But just to give some quick house rules and just housekeeping in general, this event is being recorded so that hopefully once it's been reviewed, the video recording can be posted online and or used for social media material. There is an opportunity to ask questions towards the end. Some of you have already sent questions in, which we'll try and get answered, and overall try and get them as many questions answered before the end of the session. But please do feel free to use the Q&A tab. Outside of that, as you can see on the screen, live transcripts are on. So if you are having any issues, hopefully these will help. And again, you should have the option to be able to grab the transcripts at the end. If not, please let me know and I can always get a copy sent to you. Outside of that, I'll remind everyone at the end, but we do have a Gather Town networking session towards the end, starting from 5 till 6 p.m. for anyone to feel free to come and chat about this event and just mingle. But without further ado, let's all get to the real amazing part and all why you've come, and let's get our panel on board. So please let me introduce our chair for the panel, Osama, to the virtual stage.
Hello.
Let him take it away.
Thank you, Dom. Hello, Assalamu alaikum, Ramadan Kareem, and welcome to our panel. Let me start by explaining Assalamu alaikum. It's a Muslim greeting for anyone who's not Muslim. It means peace be unto you, and Ramadan Kareem is often used to mean happy Ramadan. We are in Ramadan right now. Many Muslims around the world are fasting, including myself. So if I don't have water next to me, if I start coughing, I apologize in advance. You'll have to give me time to recover. So my name is Osama Dorius. I am the lead game designer at WB Games in Montreal, currently working on Gotham Knights. Also the chair of the Muslims in Games Special Interest Group for the IGDA. In addition to that, I am the co-founder of the Montreal Independent Game Awards. And finally, I am the co-host of the Habibis podcast, which is about 3 Arab game developers who drink tea, talk about games and life. That's enough about me. I'm going to pass it on to our illustrious panel. We're going to start with Dr. Ramana Ramzan. She's a producer at No Code Studio. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Osama. I am Romana. I'm a producer at No Code Studio here in Glasgow, Scotland. Prior to this, I was in academia for what feels like a lifetime, so I'm quite glad to have kind of transitioned into industry. I have participated in lots of things. I set up the Scottish Game Jam back in 2009. Yeah, and I'm just working on something super cool right now, which I can't talk about, which is extremely frustrating, but I'm happy to be here and excited that a panel like this is actually taking place.
Excellent. Thank you very much and welcome. Next, we have Shanila Saeed, Head of the Education at Ukie and Program Director at Digital Schoolhouse.
Hi, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. It's great to be here. Yes, in terms of who I am, exactly that. I joined Ukie 7 years ago. Before that, I used to be a teacher for a very long time in a London secondary. I won't say how many years, but sort of really transitioned and sort of still with education, but within the video games industry. So this has been really wonderful, actually, over the past 7 years, this journey, sort of being able to see now both sides of the coin, both education and industry, and doing the best I can to try and bridge that gap, really. That's me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alina. Next, we have Issam Roche, Ad Operations Manager at Sony Interactive Entertainment.
Thank you, Osama. Yeah, my name is Issam Roche. I am based in the UK. I've recently started working at PlayStation just under a year ago. And as you said, I work in the kind of network advertising department. before PlayStation, I was working in the mobile gaming industry. So I've kind of been around the industry for a few years. And I've always felt that Ramadan has kind of always went under the table in the industry. So I'm really excited that we're kind of here supporting the dialogue. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you and welcome. And finally, we have Tahir Elahi, Senior Internal Auditor at Sony Interactive Entertainment. Take it away, Tahir.
Oh, cool. Hi, Assalamu alaikum. I'm Tahir. I'm also from Sony Interactive Entertainment, better known as PlayStation. And yeah, I work in the audit team over there. There's no way to make that sound any more exciting than I just did that. So I've been here just over a year and almost coming up to a year and a half. Prior to this, I was at Activision Blizzard as well. So a little bit of experience working in the games industry, mainly from an operations side. I'm a qualified accountant. Part of the reason why I wanted to do this, obviously, is that it's to help raise awareness towards Ramadan and also Eid, and sort of echoing what Isam said about the fact that, yeah, it sort of always happens, you know, the month of Ramadan, and there's always usually like an email about it somewhere to say it's happening, but that's about it. So it's really cool that this event's happening. And I'm a massive gamer as well, so that's kind of what lends my interest to this as well.
Okay, thank you very much and welcome everyone. How about we jump straight into the first question? The first question is, what does Ramadan mean to you? Not all at once, please.
Yeah, I'll go. So for me, Ramadan is, for other people, is like something I actually look forward to every year. For people outside, they actually question this. They're like, why do you look forward to not eating or drinking for a whole month? And I think part of it is definitely the spirituality, but also the kind of self-reflection, self-development that happens throughout the month. There's a lot of discipline that goes into it. Obviously, we're not eating or drinking. Some people aren't smoking, which I don't know, but I know that it's very hard. But yeah, I guess the best way I've heard it being put is it's like a marathon. You know, you train for, well, we don't actually train for it, but you'll go through it and it's tough. And when you're doing it, you can't wait for it to finish. But once it's finished, you can't wait for the next one. There's almost a kind of thrill to it. So yeah, obviously at the moment it's kind of a weird time with COVID and everything, but I think just like Christmas, we all know that it's a bit strange, but yeah, it's been nice.
Yeah, I think the point you made about like once you get into it, it sort of becomes a bit more easier. At the beginning, it's always a bit of a challenge, I think, just finding a routine that works. So like for me, for instance, I think the broken sleeps are probably one of the more challenging aspects of it. I don't know if you guys can sort of, yeah, I can see nodding heads. So that's always a challenge because it's by the time you eat in the morning before, you know, dawn, you've eaten, you've done your morning prayers. I think it's about like, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the morning, and then you've got a 3-hour window to grab a sort of a bit of a sleep before. I've got a 4-year-old, so up for school, and not being able to obviously drink coffee at that time of the morning, which is like a ritual for me, is very tough, and obviously throughout the day. But I think it's in terms of Ramadan, it's meaning, so definitely a time to sort of reflect as well, and just almost like not reset, but a little bit of a mini reset of sort of just thinking about, you know, myself, being thankful for what I've got. Is there any improvements I can make as a person? And sort of being a bit more appreciative of that. So it's a bit of like self-reflection.
Yeah. Go for it.
I was just going to second or echo what's been said already, really. It's Ramadan is all of those things. I actually have to say, I guess it's a bit of an admission, really, so don't shoot me down, folks. But you know, in and amongst all the excitement in looking forward to Ramadan, I also get a bit of anxiety every single time, and which is really odd because I've been fasting for like over 30 years, like mashallah, every year, and so it's strange that I still get it, but I think it's anxiety centered around, can I do it? And I seem to forget my track record that I've been doing it for a couple of decades already. But, you know, there is that. But when it's absolutely, when you're in that flow and when you do that first fast, that kind of sense of achievement and that bringing together. I just find it is such a wonderful time. That for me, it's spiritual is probably the better word for it, but it's almost a slightly magical time, and especially sahur, like the broken sleep, I just can't get over that. I cannot, like, my body will not adapt. It refuses. So I struggle like every morning. But being awake at sahur, I wouldn't miss it for the world. Like, despite, I will put up with all the difficulties that it brings, but I wouldn't miss it for the world because it is such a beautifully magic time.
Yeah, I mean, to echo what everyone said before, I'm used to the broken sleep because I have 2 young kids. So that to me isn't the issue. I mean, I do look forward to Ramadan, and it's strange because I think if you're not familiar with it, you often get asked, but you can't even drink water. You know, that's always the thing that you're hit with. And that's true. But the reason why I look forward to it is because it's this inward reflection. And it's how you can try and be a better person and the things that you want to change. And you've got this month to go on this journey of, like, you know, self-discovery, which you tend to do every year, and you set goals for yourself, and some of them you'll meet, some of them you won't, but it's just a great time to connect spiritually, but also try and be better, be a better Muslim, which we all strive for. And you know, there are shortcomings through the year, but this is that time to kind of catch up in that, and also to be appreciative of the things that you have. I think that's the other thing that's really important, is to be thankful for what you have. And also the other aspect that I love is the charity side of Ramadan, and to be able to give and help others who are not, you know, who are maybe less fortunate than you. I think that's such a great thing, and it's the community spirit. So also being able to, you know, like, make food and send it to your neighbors. Okay, granted, in COVID, it's maybe not been the best time to do that, but typically, you know, it's great. And like, I have neighbors who are Muslim as well as non-Muslims, but they're just so aware of this month. And especially the non-Muslim neighbours, like, they look forward to all the foods that you're going to send them, and they're super excited. So yeah, I think it's a great month, and it's hard. And each year, like you were saying, Shanila, you know, you think, oh, can I do it? Especially these months just now where the fasts are so long. But then you kind of cast your mind back to last year, and you were thinking, well, it was a lot longer then, and, you know, we did just fine. But you do have that anxiety, and, oh, can we do it? Can we not? And I think the human body is just a wonderful thing, because you adapt and you cope. And the irony is, when it comes to Eid, you go back to your old patterns of just eating and stuffing your face, and that's great too. But yeah, you can cope just fine, and you get through it, and it's great.
Absolutely. I feel great at the end of Ramadan, to be quite honest. Like, health-wise, I feel my best right after Ramadan is over. When the only thing I'll add, because all your points I agree with, is that whenever people ask me, but is it hard? And my answer used to be the first 3 days are brutal, and then you get used to it. And then I stopped drinking coffee or tea a week before Ramadan. I realized the first 3 days were brutal because of that. It was because of the caffeine withdrawal. And then it just became a lot more manageable. Now I find it's actually the end time when you feel like you are lower in energy. It's interesting because I feel my best, but I also feel low in energy. So the last few days you count it down. And as Sam said, as soon as Ramadan is over, you can't wait for the next one. It's an odd feeling. So jumping to our next question, what can colleagues and companies do to support Muslims during Ramadan? You all fast while working, as do I. So what can they do to support us?
I'll jump in on this one, if I may. I think the first sort of point, which lends itself to what this panel is a little bit as well, it's about raising awareness in order to sort of improve the understanding of sort of why Muslims fast and why they're doing Ramadan. And I think once that becomes clearer to sort of colleagues who may or may not be aware of that, and companies as well, then they'll be better equipped to be able to sort of help and offer the support that I think people need. I think the key thing, I think partly because we've been in COVID, obviously working flexibly, this has sort of naturally happened a bit more this year. So I sort of use the word flexibility, and companies to offer flexibility being the key thing. Because of all the reasons we sort of mentioned before about, you know, the patterns of fasting, so waking up early to sort of set yourself up for the day, and then you've got other things you've got to get on with, obviously work and so on. So I think it's important to allow people to sort of work flexibly and empower them to make the right decisions when it comes to work, especially around this month. Because I think, as you say, as the sort of days go on, you do start feeling maybe the fatigue a little bit more, and you'll sort of see that people may not be their normal selves, right? So yeah, those are the kind of things I would aim for.
Yeah, I definitely echo the kind of the understanding behind it. Is, you know, as you said, we do get asked every year, not even water, like, and I think that comes from maybe like I haven't done a good enough job explaining to people around me as well, but I think it's also the kind of mentality of sometimes it's a bit far-fetched for people to think of that. And I think the whole point of us doing this is to understand, you know, and be appreciative of what we have and think, okay, well, maybe people have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. There are people out there that don't have the luxury of going to their fridge and stuff and just taking whatever they want. So we're going through that. But I think it's, as you said, the understanding. And, you know, I always tell everyone I work with maybe a week or two prior that, look, I'm not going to have any coffee, not going to have any food. I might be a bit grumpy, so I apologize in advance. But yeah, it's just understanding that moods do change because of it. And, you know, it's understanding, as you said, why we do it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think awareness, 100%, flexibility, definitely. Yeah, especially towards the fatigue that sets in at the end. You can be tired, and different people react in different ways to fatigue. So just kind of awareness of that. Stop asking me if I want a cup of tea. I do want a cup of tea. I can't have a cup of tea. It's my favorite drink in the world. But no, people forget. It's like, you know, and I've never been offended by it. It's just a light comment. But I guess the other thing also to add is we all do it. I think that's the one thing to kind of recognize, or if I speak for myself, actually, I guess you in any workplace that I've worked in, even when I worked in the heart of kind of Tooting, you know, which is kind of very kind of has a huge Muslim population and stuff, but you know, I am a minority in my ethnicity and my religion. And so my natural course of action is to adapt to the majority around me. And so it would never occur to me to make a point about something like this or complain or anything along those lines. I'm never going to do it. And I can imagine there might be lots of other Muslims that are never going to, maybe, you know, some people call it speaking up for yourselves, but you won't, because you've spent your life learning that you need to adapt to everybody else because you are the minority. But simple things can make such a big difference. So food is a very social thing. And in lots of cultures, including the one we're living in. And so work can sometimes inadvertently organize, be it team training days, away days, events, and they make a big thing of the lunch and the food and the drink. And you know what? It really sucks. It really is not nice. I mean, it's just because you know, like I said, I will participate in whatever work is doing, whatever, you know, and be it Ukie, you know, whatever is organized, I will participate if I can, if it obviously doesn't go against, you know, what I practice. But it's not then nice to be in a room participating where everybody around you is, yeah, drinking cups of tea and eating and all the rest of it. And you can't. So you're not there 100% with it. And you adapt and you put up with it. But if you can avoid it, it's only a month. If you can avoid it and have it either side of the month, I think Muslim colleagues up and down the country probably appreciate that quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think flexibility, yes, definitely 100%. And if you've got like meetings or anything that's just like mentally intensive and requires you to be there, it's probably best to have that in the morning rather than, you know, schedule that in for later on in the day. The food thing, in the context of definitely, like, you know, if there's team building events, which I know is not happening at the moment, but when we eventually go back to some kind of normal world that we remembered, that kind of stuff, yeah, okay, that I would definitely agree with. Like, you know, if that can be kind of held off, that would be great. But in the normal context, like I don't mind if others around me are having something to eat or drink, like it doesn't bother me. And I think that's important as well, because sometimes people who are not really familiar might feel awkward about it. But the best thing is to just, you know, communicate, I guess, as well, and ask. If you work in smaller teams, like ask your colleagues who might be fasting, like, you know, is there anything that I could do to kind of just maybe make things better or be more respectful of what you're doing? But yeah, I've never actually, it's never bothered me when people have been sitting eating next to me or anything. I'm totally cool with that. Just don't bring any chips near me and we're good. Yeah, so I think just have a dialogue, I think is the best thing. Yeah.
Open communication is key, absolutely. So on to our next question. What does Eid mean for you? And I know that different people celebrate Eid in different ways, so maybe if you could even take a minute to talk about how Eid is celebrated by your family or by your community, that would be good as well.
I'll go first, I guess. So I'm from Pakistan, and culturally there are differences in how we do celebrate Eid. Typically what we would do is the morning of Eid, so the night before Eid is always frantic, because there's the whole, you know, is the moon coming, is everyone going to see the moon or not? Is it Eid tomorrow? Is it not? And it's like, from my memories of Eid, like, you know, the mums are always super stressed out, because it's like, are we making a big meal or are we not making a big meal? Like, what's going on? So, you know, and then when there has been the sighting of the moon, and, you know, it's been announced that Eid will be tomorrow, there's just such a buzz and excitement. Friends get together, you know, we get together to get kind of henna mehndi on our hands, and it's a really fun atmosphere. And then the morning of Eid, the men typically tend to go to the mosque to pray, and, you know, the women are home, not because that's where the women's place is, but it's just typically that's the way it's been done. And women can go to the mosque and pray if they want to, but more often than not it's men. And then they'll come home, and we typically prepare sevia, which is like made with vermicelli, and it's made with milk and really, really tasty, and usually there's a big massive pot of it. And you have that for breakfast. Then once everybody gets together, you wish everyone Eid Mubarak once you're all nicely dressed. And we have that, and then after that it's just a case of visiting friends and family, and just eating lots of food. And by the end of the day, you're just so incredibly stuffed, it's not even, you know, it's like you've consumed more food in that one day than you did, I don't know, the last 6-7 months that you've been doing things, which is nice. COVID has certainly changed things, and also I think Eid, it depends what day of the week it falls on.
Yeah.
And I was having this chat earlier on with one of my colleagues. Over here, like typically, because it's not a holiday or it's not a public holiday, I've always tended to sort of carry about my day-to-day activities. So if I'm working, I'll carry on with work. And the reason for that is most of the people in my family will be working, and we then tend to celebrate on the weekend, or in the evening we'll get together for dinner and do something. I've been lucky enough to celebrate Eid in Pakistan, and it's just been a completely different atmosphere. You know, there's a 3-day holiday over there. Everyone is off and they're celebrating, and it's just nice. You get dressed up in all your new clothes and you go see family and friends. And so that's been like a big difference. Like over here, it's just been a normal day if it's Monday to Friday. I know some people do take it off, but I think it's just circumstantial depending on what everyone in your family is doing. So yeah, that's what we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely echo the night before. There's kind of like this buzz of waiting to see if the moon will be sighted. And there's always somebody who comes across saying, I've seen it, I've got something, some obscure Twitter has told them that it's there, and we're all still waiting for the official sighting. But yeah, like on the actual day, very much family oriented, super kind of going and visiting people, closeness, as you said, going to the mosque, usually in the morning for Eid prayers, haircuts maybe, new clothes, kind of sorting yourself out. It's almost like you're going into the next stage of the year almost. It's like, I like to think of it as like a small new year where you're kind of moving yourself into the next stage. So you go get a nice haircut, maybe shave, new clothes, go to the mosque, see people. And I always have this kind of guilt of, am I allowed to be eating? It's like, you're there and it's like, you're not joking with me. But yeah, so I always love it. And as you said, I kind of usually do it here. I tend to take the days off if I can, go and visit family, go and see people throughout the day. I've been in Jordan once where it was Eid, and that was amazing just because you go to the mosque in the morning, but then you just travel between like 50 different people. You go and see everybody. It's just an amazing time. So yeah.
I've yeah, I mean, the night before Eid, Chandrat, we call it, everyone's sort of going nuts practicing their henna designs and all sorts of stuff. It is so exciting though, and nowadays in sort of various parts of London that are more populated by Muslims, you'll end up with all the shops open till very late at night, and it's almost like having a street party out there. Pre-pandemic days, of course, but it's lots and lots of fun. But yeah, that sounds like my too. It's definitely sort of very family oriented, and I think that's the beauty about it. It is that excitement. It is that kind of collective coming together, and it doesn't matter. What I love is so in my family also, women generally tend to pray at home, but I have been to the mosque and prayed a few times. And what I really love about that is it's that Eid Mubarak hug that you give after namaz. And it doesn't matter who it is. Like that's, I mean, it sounds actually, when you think about it in light of the pandemic, you're thinking actually it's probably one of the most frightening things you could actually think of. But like, I will hug 50 strangers that I have never met before and likely never meet again. But it's this just common joy that is shared and spread, and it really doesn't matter. And I think that probably just kind of captures so much of the essence of kind of what is Eid.
Yeah, Shanila, what you just said about the hugging at the mosque, that's actually bang on, because I think it's the only time like when I remember going to the mosque on Eid, and like it's the only time where you sort of hug strangers where it just feels normal or natural. It doesn't feel awkward. That's the thing, because everyone's sort of there for the same purpose, which is to celebrate Eid. And so it's like a little mini event. But also like having a 4-year-old, it's sort of becoming a little thing where he's now like, oh, when is Eid? Because I've got like, this is what I want for presents. So it's gone from, so I don't know if you guys used to do Eid, which is like giving money to sort of the kids around in the family. But he's sort of like trying to commercialize it a bit now and basically saying, here's a list of things I'd like for Eid. So the presents have to be wrapped and readied as well. So yeah.
Perfect.
Which is never the case in my day when I was growing up.
Our focus has been on the kids as well. I come from a very big family. I have 4 sisters and 3 brothers, so we're 8 kids. And by the time our youngest was an adult, then we had kids of our own. So like at that point, it just passed on to them. So it's always about them, or us when we were the kids. The presents, the Eid, as you mentioned, and that's beautiful. Really, the focus is on the next generation more than anything else. I'm going to get a little bit ahead, and there's one question that I'm going to answer right away because we mentioned it, and I want it to stay fresh. Someone asked what the significance of the moon sighting is. So basically, Ramadan is a month. Ramadan is like the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. So it's basically September, and it's a lunar calendar. So the moon, a new moon will mark the new month. So that's basically what you're waiting for, is to see for Ramadan, you're waiting for the Ramadan month. If you're going to see a little bit of a crescent, that means it's the start of the month. And for Eid, you're waiting for the month of Shawwal to start, the next month, which says that Ramadan ends. So it's basically what it is. And that said, let's move on to the next question. So let's discuss Muslim representation in video games and in the media in general. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Any good examples, bad examples? Maybe we'll stay away from the bad examples. Let's stick to the good ones.
Oh, question. Muslim representation in video games. Is there any? I'm from a layperson. Like, genuinely speaking, my gut reaction when on kind of hearing that question is, what representation? Although I'm sure that's very, very wrong, and there probably are examples out there. But your general perception is?
I think there are starting to be, or there are, like the one that comes to mind. I think somebody put it in the chat as well. They mentioned Avengers. That more recently that's the case because the lead character Kamala Khan, she's Muslim, But what I would say is like it's not an original character. So she was written that way in the Marvel comics. And so obviously if you're making a game from an already existing IP, then you're going to pull it on from there. So I agree. Like I don't know if it's been. I mean, I can't say if it's been done well or if at all. I think the question is, has it been done much at all, really? But from my perspective as a gamer, yeah, it's hard to think of iconic characters who are Muslim. Apart from that, the Avengers example, but I don't know if the others might have something more to add to that.
I think somebody's mentioned it already, and this is again quite we don't actually know, but there are a few characters in Overwatch that could potentially be Muslim. We don't actually know, or I don't know. I haven't done the research to find out, but I know there are a few kind of Arabic-speaking characters. Whether they're Muslim or not, I'm not sure. But yeah, I agree. I haven't really seen enough, or any that I can think of off the top of my head. And yeah, I think it's just we're seeing things moving slowly in the right direction in general in the industry, and fingers crossed, you know, the Muslim representation will come with that as well.
There are examples that I could point out myself, actually, of good Muslim representation. But to Isam's point, actually, most of the representation that we're starting to see, and it's a good thing, is we're seeing people from Muslim majority countries starting to be represented in video games. And I think that's important, and it's a very strong first step. Like Anna and Farah from Overwatch are good examples, but there's also like Hakan, who's Turkish in Street Fighter, and there's Shaheen, who's in Tekken. All these characters, what's important about them is that their religion is treated in the same way that the religions of the other characters are treated. So they're not mentioned. And I think that's important too. Like, we don't want to be tokenized. So we don't want to have a billboard, Muslim, 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 like on the chests of every character as soon as they come forward. So if the religion of the other characters are not mentioned, it's not even I'm not saying it's totally acceptable. I mean, it's the right call to also not mention the religion of the Muslims as well. Like we want to be normalized as much as possible, and that's the first step to normalization. Another thing that I'm seeing spread like quickly, and I'm really happy about that, with examples of, for example, Spider-Man, where you're just going to have NPCs, random NPCs in the background who are just going to be wearing hijab or who kind of look brown and, you know, could potentially be Muslim. And I think that's important for our normalization as well. And these are very strong first steps, because our big problem with the negative representation is that we were always represented in a negative light. If we were on screen, we weren't happy, we regretted it. So jumping to the other extreme where we're only represented in a positive light, it creates an unrealistic situation where most Muslims are just somewhere in the middle. They're just like normal, you know, living their lives. Yep. And that's very important. We just want to be normalized. We just want to, I want to be able to see a Muslim on screen and my heart not to stop and cringe and wait for the bad thing to happen, or the adhan to play out before an explosion, or whatever other stereotype comes up. And I think these are the steps that we're in now. There are other characters that are starting to be more prominent who are Muslim, like Kamal Khan is an excellent, perfect example. And I'm looking forward to more in that light. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Romana, did you want to add something to that?
No, that's absolutely fine. No, I think, you know, the pause at the start, I think, kind of speaks volumes as well. You're trying to kind of think who are the positive Muslim characters that we see in video games. I think what you said, Osama, about, you know, the fact that we don't need to be branded, I guess, as being Muslims. Like, let the character or the backstory reveal what, you know, the depth of what that character represents or stands for, because in our day-to-day lives, that's not the first thing that you'll gain when you meet or interact or speak to another person. Your first and foremost burning question isn't what's your religion, what's your belief, you know, what. So those are things that should come about through the gameplay or are revealed in other ways. But again, yeah, I'm glad that we're speaking about the positives, because it is Ramadan and we should think positively and not focus on the negative. Yes, there is still a problem in terms of how we are represented, but that's a much wider problem and a reflection of the industry as a whole, and how studios, I guess, are represented internally as well, and what are the voices that are coming through, and that's something we need to focus on. So it's part of a much bigger problem that needs to be addressed. But there are, I think, outside of characters, in terms of what games are doing to accommodate or represent Muslims in a positive light. Like, you know, last year, I think, was it in Animal Crossing, the fact that this was something that Rami tweeted about, that he was able to do iftari, or, you know, suhoor with other Muslims who were fasting. Like, I thought that was fantastic, that something like that could be facilitated, especially at a point in time when we're so disconnected from everyone around us, and Ramadan is about community and coming together. So I think the fact that games have kind of nodded to that, that's definitely very encouraging to see, and I hope that that continues and evolves as time goes on.
Yeah, I had the honor of attending one of Rami's iftars. It was really great. And another point that Rami often brings up is that we could use for more Ramadan themed events. We have events for Halloween and Christmas and Chinese New Year and a whole bunch of others. And that's a good thing. I'm not saying, hey, it's not, you know, it's not fair. And I'm not bringing it from a negative point. I'm just saying it's about time we acknowledge that there are almost 2 billion people in the world who celebrate something in video games as well. I think it was, I don't remember if it was League of Legends or Fortnite, but one of the major games had a small hint towards Ramadan recently, but region locked in only one small region. It's a good first steps. I'm a big fan of first steps, but like I'm waiting for these second steps to start happening, the other shoes to drop.
I think part of the problem is also that it's not that it's a deliberate oversight sometimes. I think it's just that because you've not got that representation internally,
Yep.
for someone to voice and ask that question, hey, did you think about X, Y, and Z? You know, I think that's part of the problem as well. And sometimes it just takes somebody to ask that question for people to think, oh yeah, why are we neglecting 2 billion people? Like, let's do something about that. So yeah.
Absolutely.
I do think it's,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I do think it's interesting that, you know, there are companies, I think the best example for me is Riot right now, who have really kind of started focusing on, you know, the population, mainly in the Middle East at the moment, but they've actually kind of hired teams specifically to focus on that region. They're making marketing materials specific for the region, specific for the people. And I think, as you said, those are kind of the first steps where we start to see, you know, those companies saying, okay, this is a big part of our audience. You know, as you said, it's 2 billion people around the world. And another thing that I'd like to kind of highlight is those 2 billion aren't, you know, just Middle Easterners. Obviously, we've got a very kind of broad range of people, and some people forget that countries like Indonesia have like 230 million Muslims, and people don't think of Indonesia when they think of Muslims to start with. And I think that's about how we change that kind of narrative of, hey, it's not just a one size fits all. Yeah, and Nigeria is another example. But yeah, it's not a one size fits all, and I think this is the awesome part of, as you said, representation as well.
Absolutely. To that question, actually, what other things should be improved or changed? Because this marketing is a good trend. I saw those videos. I loved them, by the way. They were incredible and authentic, and I'm looking forward to other regions getting some, like, similar representation. What other changes do you think companies can do? Other, like hiring people, more Muslims, of course, is going to help, giving them more of a voice. What other changes do you think companies can do to represent us better? It's a tough one, huh?
Yeah, it is. Because I think you touched on the hiring aspect of it, and I think that's obviously one element, and that applies to a lot of just diversity in general. I think it's not restricted just to Muslim representation. There's a lot of other races and that it can apply to. And I think over time, you know, if it's about how do you open up those opportunities and pathways? So almost taking one step back from recruitment, it's also about like grassroots, for want of a better term. So like, how do you actually show people like us, for instance, you know, that actually you can get into gaming, or there is a career for you in this industry? Because I think historically, at least from my perspective, it's been a very male-dominated industry, and I think that is changing, and we are going in the right direction. So I think it's definitely about like creating opportunities at grassroots to get people into the industry. And I think once we start doing that and your teams become more diverse, that will naturally touch on the previous points, that it will naturally increase the diversity of content and the output, and you'd get it in a manner that it's representative rather than just you know, like you say, we don't want to be labeled as a Muslim character or Muslim for the sake of Muslim. So it'll be somebody that you can actually relate to when you're playing the game, and it won't break the immersion. Because one of the things I really hate when I see sort of diversity, and I think it's great that they try, you know, sort of developers or publishers try to do that, but at the same time, I feel like it's like shoehorned in, or it's just, you can tell when it's not done properly. So I think, yeah, from that perspective, for me, it's about the grassroots, but also the recruitment. They kind of go hand in hand. Recruitment's a tricky one, because do you set targets to say we want to be, you know, X% diverse in order to actually drive that change, or how do you sort of move that needle, if you will? And again, yeah, that's I think is a challenge for companies in general.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that kind of grassroots is very important. And I don't know about all of you, but I kind of, when I initially was looking to get into gaming and I spoke to my dad about it, he didn't think of gaming as a career. He thought of it as a hobby that you waste your time on. And if you do that, you're not going to go anywhere.
Mine still do. My parents still do. So,
and I think we're changing that, but it's just that that kind of mentality. Especially, I don't know how many of your parents are kind of first gen immigrants as well. It kind of like they've got a survival instinct of doctor, lawyer, engineer, failure. And so it's kind of like trying to convince them, first of all, that this is going to work, and then actually making it work as well on top of that to prove them wrong or prove yourself right, I think is quite difficult. So yeah, definitely supporting in that. And, you know, the positive examples are the best examples for people. I think another side is, you know, the research that goes into the cultures itself. Like, Tara, you've got the Ghost of Tsushima box in the background. And I think that's a really good example of, you know, representation done by somebody who isn't from that culture done right. Like, it was a really amazing game, and you can tell the amount of research that went into it, the amount of love and care that went into it to make something that would be received well by the culture it was about. And I think that's an example of representation done well, and that comes from the research and comes from the kind of wanting to understand. And I think that's kind of where we can see more of that.
Absolutely. One of the questions that usually gets asked among game dev circles is, when did you know you wanted to be a game dev? Specifically between game designers, we tell that to each other a lot. And I've noticed that my answer is actually very different than most other people's that I work with. Most are white males. And generally their answers are, when I got a Nintendo at 5 or at 7 or whatever it is. And mine was 26. I made games since I was 12. I used to make board games and card games, and I even made Flash video games in my early 20s, but I never considered a career in this direction until a Muslim Arab friend of mine became a game designer. And then I'm like, well, I could do that too. And I became a game designer at 27. I was lucky enough to have a career change at that point. So I think representation matters, not just within the games, but also within the companies. The more people that you hire from diverse backgrounds, marginalized people of any kind, the more other marginalized people are going to feel comfortable working at your company. And I've had that situation where I had a job offer at a small indie startup, and I showed up, and no one there looked like me at all. And the few people who kind of were, you know, marginalized were really at the lower levels of the company. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I'd be comfortable here, and if I get hired here, I don't see any path to being promoted. So I think there's a lot of work to do to hire people, but there's more work to do after you've hired people. If anyone wants to speak more to that, like what kind of things can we do to help improve that situation? That's a good topic as well.
Yeah, I think that's a
sorry, go.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I think it's a really
I
think it's that pipeline as well. So you know, once you've attracted diverse talent, how do you actually retain them and promote them and grow them? And it's not there's no easy answer to it, but I think it requires hard conversations internally. Like, you need to be committed to want that change for your team, your studio. Coming back to what we were saying about, you know, just like in terms of recruitment, like I think certainly the bigger companies do have the capacity to support outreach and you know, those diversity type initiatives, or they can certainly support existing initiatives that are out there, who are doing a lot of the hard work. So I'm currently on the committee of Limit Break, and you know, the reason I wanted to be part of them and involved with them is because they're doing fantastic work. You know, they are trying to grow and retain diverse talent and support them in any way that they can. And the fact that we exist is, you know, we require sponsors to help us. And so if you can't do something yourself, there are lots of initiatives out there that you could be supporting and promoting or trying to help. In terms of retention, yeah, I mean, I think you need to be, you need to look at also like the communication materials that you're putting out. So even simple things like job adverts, like, you know, get somebody to sanity check them. Like having something that's very dude or bro-fied is not going to appeal. Like, and this touches on the point that Shanila made earlier, that as minorities, we've always been accustomed to adapting to what the majority wants or have dictated. So, you know, like I've been to industry events where I've accepted that, yep, I'm going to be networking at, you know, an event in the evening, which is going to be heavily focused around drinks. And I've often wondered, like, why can't we do coffee meetups or cake meetups or something that's just a bit
ice cream,
you know,
ice cream meetups.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, you know, but you accept that because you are a minority and you don't want to speak out against the norm. Things have changed in the past, and it's great to see that change coming through. But it's really hard to kind of stand up and speak out and say, you know, I want something a bit different. But like, if you look at the language, if you're saying, oh, you know, our work perks are things like free drinks, that's great. But for the people who don't drink, like, what else do you have, you know, for them? And automatically you'll kind of think, I'm not going to fit in that culture or that environment, and I don't want to make it awkward for others either. So automatically that's going to put you off. So even simple things like job ads or your company profile, that outward reflection says a lot about who you are.
So I guess just to add to that, and I guess I'll caveat this as my personal feelings. I don't want to generalize to all the Muslims. But sometimes, and Ramana, I think you've just portrayed that so beautifully. That's exactly right. And it is that sort of drink-centered conversation, and going into a company where a lot of, even within the company social, seems to be around the pub, or, you know, after a Friday night. It's like, I don't go to pubs, and I know people rationalize it, you know, people that are not Muslims will rationalize, well, you see, you don't have to drink, like you could just have some Coke. And it's like, I could either choose to have a very long conversation with you talking about the whole atmosphere around pubs and why I want to avoid it, or I could just come up with something simple enough. And sometimes you end up making, I felt that I've had to make a decision where I'm either going to go along with these things, like such as going to the pub on a Friday night or doing this with drinks, and therefore feel like to a certain element I might be compromising my faith, or I'm not going to compromise my faith, but what I've compromised instead is an opportunity to truly bond and make friends with my colleagues. And I know in my sort of younger years, in a previous company, and I did miss out on a lot of friendships because there were so many things that I couldn't do. And I come from a very conservative Pakistani Muslim background. My parents are very conscious about retaining the Pakistani culture in England. And so social events pre-marriage, there was a lot of stuff as a girl I was not allowed to do. Like, you know, comedy night on a Friday night with drinks and everything like that. No, I'm not allowed. I'm sorry. Like, I can go to my parents' evening that I need to do as a teacher, but I'm not allowed to go and hang out with friends at a comedy club on a Friday night surrounded by drinking and alcohol because there's going to be loads of guys there and all the rest of it. Try explaining that to somebody who's not Pakistani Muslim and they'll never get it. Like, they will literally never get it. And so I think I will say, actually, and things are different at Ukie. The feel at Ukie is very different. And, you know, and I think it's been wonderful working in a company that does like to take things into consideration. But generally my experience through my working life has been it's friendships with the team and integrating and fitting in with that culture, or it's my faith. And where I've chosen largely not to compromise on my faith, I've missed out on friendships, and I've missed out on that culture and all of those things. And for some people, they'll just walk.
It's actually true. It echoes my experience. I started when GDC was still a thing that you went to physically. I would have ice cream socials every day of GDC as an alternative to the big boozy parties. And they became incredibly popular. I'm really sad that that's over for now, at least. Hopefully we'll go back to them. But we don't always have the time or the energy to do our own thing. And it's not necessarily our responsibility. That's only one option, and it's not an option that's available to all of us. So hopefully companies are listening and they're going to move in that direction and just give us an alternative once in a while. We're not saying take away the things that make you happy, just include other things that make other people happy. And we're not the only ones who don't drink. I know a lot of people who are not Muslim who don't drink. I know a lot of recovering alcoholics, for example, or people who's just their choice and who don't show up to these things. So it would be great to once in a while have something that's focused on something else. That's all. Dom, how are we doing for time?
We are at the 10-minute mark. So unless you've got more questions on your sheet, I think we're open to audience questions. And I'd just like to say, I absolutely love that last segment. That's absolutely ideal. Like, inclusivity in our events needs to be thought about going forward. And I know for me, that's such an important matter because, as you've all stated, just that the fact around drinking culture is just, it's a bit much. And it's like, actually, ice cream meetups, I think that should become the new craze during the day.
Yeah. Non-dairy ice cream as an option, of course, so you could be as accommodating.
Which is amazing, because obviously people who are lactose intolerant can get involved as well.
Or vegans as well, or any other group.
Yeah, well, the other one, I think just wanted to tag on to the end of that, the food topic is, like a lot of companies offer, you know, like on-site cafes, but I find sometimes, like through friends or talking to them, they don't do halal food. So you have to become a vegetarian if you want to take advantage of that. And it's kind of like a benefit that you can't take advantage of. And I feel like it's just a small thing they could address. And whether someone's ever asked the question, I don't know. Because like working in London and Soho, it's very cultural, and I'd say like almost 90% of restaurants now cater for halal menus. So even if you go out for work lunches or whatever, you know, I always sort of personally, I always voice up and say, well, can we go somewhere with a halal food menu, just because it's my choice to eat that, or I'd rather not eat vegetarian food. And so I feel like, yeah, companies should definitely look at that. If they have an internal cafe or cafeteria offering, like, can we do something around the menu and actually, you know, offer, or even when they do events, you know, and it's often something that's overlooked in terms of like, well, we've got all this food, or like Christmas parties, for example, as well, but they'll never have a menu that's halal or like the equivalent, you know.
Absolutely. We've had hot dog days where someone had to speak up and say, are you going to have any halal or vegan options? And thankfully our company did accommodate. It's not that hard for them. While they're buying the wieners, just go into the other section and buy other different ones. They're not more expensive. They're just different, right? Yeah.
Takes that effort into consideration.
Yeah, and you can make them available to everyone. It's not something that's exclusive or, you know, special in that way. Say, hey, we have chicken ones on the side if anyone wants, and there you go. So I see some questions here that we could jump right in.
There are some in the Zoom chat, but I'd also just like to, because we've got some on Slido from people who've posted before the event started. So I'd just like to pose some of these first, and then we can go into some of the Zoom questions. So we've got a question from Amina, who's asked, for any and all panelists, have you had to use annual leave to be able to fast, especially around the last day, 10 days, and Eid?
For Eid, definitely. And again, it's usually the last day, plus, because you don't know when Eid is going to be, so it's normally one day or the other. But historically, in order to take time off for Eid, it's always been to use annual leave. And I had some points on this earlier about, I think, just, you know, what can colleagues or companies do, or companies specifically do, to support Muslims. And I think I read it somewhere, I came across it, but the idea of holiday swaps, which is, you know, basically a lot of Muslims may not celebrate public holidays like bank holidays or other public holidays that we get throughout the year. And it's just giving them the ability to be able to swap one of those days around. for Eid instead of having to use their annual leave, because at the end of the day, it's 2 extra days, right? Which isn't, that's not asking for a lot. And it's such a simple thing to be able to accommodate. But certainly, yeah, I personally have used annual leave pretty much in every job that I can think of, if I wanted to take the time off for Eid on that day, to celebrate it.
And I agree with her, and or even just add 2 days of religious observance to your leave allowance, and that will accommodate all faiths, and not just Islam. I've always I've always tried to take Eid day off, and it's always been part of the annual leave allowance. It would be nice if that, for example, a company started to take that on board, and you didn't have to do that, you know, so that you could just a little bit. I think a lot of appreciation there from a lot of people, I think. But for fasting, I think that was part of the question. I've personally chosen not to take time off for fasting. For me, Ramzan is a month, and the idea is that you live your life within the month of Ramadan. And if that is more of a struggle, that is part of the challenge, frankly speaking. That's part of the test. That's part of the learning experience. So for me to make significant changes to my daily schedule, other than building in more prayer, but just to make my fasting easier, for me, that is personally not an option. I don't see that as any going with the month.
On the other side, I have actually taken time off from Ramadan, especially in the summer. They're really like long, hot days. We have float days, and I usually reserve the float days for Eid. So we have 3 float days a year. Almost every company I've worked at in Montreal has 3 or 5 or something along those lines. I always reserve 2 of them for the Eid day, so I've never had a problem taking off Eid, thankfully, especially because I let people know in advance that it's one of these 2 days. But for Ramadan, there are some days where I'm like, you know what, I'm not being productive at work. I'm just going to take like half a day at the end of the day and, you know, recover and then come back the next day. I've never had the misfortune of having any pushback from an employer. I do respect, honestly, your stance on that. And that's actually a really powerful one. And I wish I had the resolve. But, you know, some days it's just when people allow you flexibility and they give you big smiles, sometimes it's okay to just take it, you know, just if you're having a day, just, you know, take half of the day off. I've never taken like 2 weeks off in Ramadan, like just like the last 2 weeks, anything like that. Although that sounds pretty good. I've never done that, but I've done the, I'm just not feeling it today. I'm going to stop working at 1 p.m. or something. Yeah.
Amazing. And then because some of the rest of the questions from the Slido kind of match with a question that's in the Zoom chat, kind of go through the Zoom chat questions now. So from Melissa, are there any aspects to Ramadan outside of the fasting during daylight hours? And can you explain a bit more about the moon sightings and what impact that has on your celebrations?
Yeah, I explained the moon sighting part already, but we could speak to the other part about the other aspects of Ramadan. I could jump in, that's fine. So Ramadan is not only abstaining from food and drink, it's actually abstaining from other things as well. Lying, cheating. We're always not supposed to do this, but in Ramadan it's especially underlined because it could break your fast. So that's a big deal. So you're not supposed to be doing any kind of sin. Many sins do that. There's also abstaining from any sexual activity during the fasting hours. Afterwards, it's you know, do what you like. That's okay. But during fasting, that's also something that could break your fast. And generally, it's just that. It's just anything that is negative, like any of the regular sins that usually you're not supposed to do. There's extra emphasis in Ramadan not to do them. And that could make Muslims more grumpy too. What? I can't swear? No.
Yeah, that's a tough one sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
For sure. Yeah. This is not really a Ramadan thing, I suppose, but obviously Muslims should pray 5 times a day. And I guess, I don't know if there might be people in the chat that aren't aware of that, but certainly I feel like it happens a lot more during Ramadan. Personally speaking, that's just for me. And you sort of, I tend to carve out the time to actually do it 5 times a day. more regularly, let's say, during the month of Ramadan than I would otherwise. But that's just a personal thing.
Yeah, and the other thing, like a lot of people tend to do, although I'm guilty of not doing it, is they try and read the Quran during the 30 days of Ramadan as well, which is, again, really, really nice that you set yourself the time to do that, because you find that the rest of the year you might not have the opportunity, but during Ramadan it just feels extremely powerful to be able to read it from start to finish, and a lot of people do that, which is nice.
Excellent. And this question kind of takes some of the questions from the slider, so I'm going to try and combine them in before the session. So from Sakai and a bit from Amina, what was the biggest challenges as a Muslim in the early and mid stages of your career, and how did you overcome it? And kind of, has there been sensibilities that you've seen from the start of your career to now, and have you felt like as you've become more into the industry or / your career, have you felt that you can bring your whole self more to your job than when you started? Open to all the panel and the chair.
Yeah, I'll go. So I would probably consider myself still in the early mid stages of my career. But yeah, I think something that we touched on earlier is the almost believing that you can actually do that thing, and that thing is an option for you. As Osama said, it's like sometimes you need to see somebody that you know doing it, that looks like you or talks like you or acts like you or is the same religion as you, to kind of believe, hey, this is actually a viable option for me. So I think that's one thing, is kind of believing in yourself, and hopefully we're setting towards a path of, hey, look, there's people like us that do work in the industry, which is really nice for others hopefully to see as well. But yeah, so I think that was a big one for me. And yeah, I overcame it just by, I guess, myself. It was just more of I persevered. That was my goal. I really wanted to get into the industry. I did what my dad asked and did a degree in what he wanted, and then I kind of moved on to what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I have a very specific answer to that question, where the first company I worked in, I worked on a game that misrepresented Muslims. And as a junior in the industry, without a lot of options, having applied to almost hundreds of companies and only getting one job offer, I didn't feel I had the luxury of bailing and saying no. How I dealt with it, it still doesn't sit well with me to this day, but how I dealt with it is I tried to address the biggest problems. So I looked at it like from a constructive point of view, and I said, okay, what are the main things about this game that I would like to fix? And like, I could give you an example. There are many, but one of the things I successfully was able to fix was that there was actually a gunfight that took place in a mosque in a like really sacrilegious way. And I was able to make that not a mosque, and like convince people to make it into a random palace. The game was still problematic. It still misrepresented Muslims when it came out. But slowly, as I became, I had more of a voice, both in the company and in the industry, I was able to turn down projects that did that, or have a bigger impact on them. So it's, it's difficult, but you do what you can, right?
Amazing. And I guess just noticing the time, as the last question that is a really nice one to end this off. What can employees do to help support their staff during Ramadan?
I think we answered that.
Well, any last bits? Any, like, I guess the way I want to word it is anything that you personally think this is like bullet point sentence, boom, someone can grab it and just take it.
Try and avoid socials during Ramadan, and if you can do them afterwards or before, that would be better. So like company-wide socials, that is, and obviously within your teams as well, it's a bit easier to sort of move those around, but certainly at a company level, it would help.
Yeah, and I would add, I think we kind of covered it as well, is the flexibility. Is just, this happens once a year. It's not the whole year. It happens once a year. having that flexibility to, whether it's, you know, if we do have to book annual leave off, allowing us to book maybe 3 days instead of the 2 and then cancelling one almost last minute, it is really nice. But yeah, I'd say flexibility is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, and just on the flexibility, I think the one thing, I suppose, I don't want sort of people going away from this to think is like, oh, if everyone's fasting during Ramadan, they're not going to be 100% productive for 30 days. Because, like, don't forget, people work differently. So some people might actually work after iftari. So once you open your fast in the evening, you're more, obviously you've eaten food, you're more kind of alert. And so you might carve out like a few hours to actually work late at night instead. And like, we're fortunate enough to work in a global business. And I think the whole sort of working 9 to 5 thing is slowly moving away anyway. So that's where I just want to sort of point that out. I think people, whilst they may not be as productive during the day, they'll certainly make up for it, I'm sure, at a time that works for them later on. You just have to empower and trust people to be able to make the right choices.
And I just add, have a conversation. I think the conversations we've had around this, not just here in this panel, but in the lead up to doing this panel, and Dom, the kind of work that you have done with Sony, it's just, I guess for me, in all my years of working, this is the first time in my working life I have literally had someone sit down with me and say, right, Ramadan, what do we need to know? And let's have an honest and open conversation. And it has been wonderful to experience. So I want to say thank you very much, Dom. But I also want to say, I think I do honestly believe that actually a lot of companies have conversations with your colleagues, because they will appreciate it and they will be open and honest with you about what they need. No two Muslims will have the same requirements or requests. So just speak to them and find out what it is.
Absolutely. I want to thank all of you first, because you are the ones that have made this amazing experience. Apologies, we've gone past a bit of our time, people, but we have now come to the end of this session. For anyone in the audience and our panelists, we'll be doing an hour session of networking. But before we go, our lovely panelists, is there anything that you'd like to plug before we end this event and have all of you have a break from chatting for a little bit?
I'll start. Habibi's podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the podcast started in January. We're doing well. We have like over 20,000 listens, and we'd love to have more. We have a strong community on Discord. Come join us. Yeah, thank you.
Can I plug Digital Schoolhouse? You plug Digital Schoolhouse. It's all around computing education, but it is all around doing it in a way that we attempt to be as inclusive as we possibly can. So trying to kind of close that gap in attainment at school level. If you're interested, come speak to me.
Yeah, and I mentioned Limit Break earlier. So if you are part of a company who can sponsor us, that'd be great. If you can donate your time as a mentor, that would be fantastic. Or if you want to be a mentee, well, this year's applications have closed, but keep an eye out for next year. But any support that you could provide would be fantastic.
I don't represent them, but I really like what they're doing. For me, a charity called War Child, they do amazing work kind of in war-torn countries and kind of with children that have been affected by war. So if you're looking for either donations or places to donate, whether that's for Ramadan or that's just general, they're a really good kind of choice.
Amazing. And I can't, oh, Tahir, do you want to go?
No, nothing as fancy as that. I just wanted to say, for any PlayStation employees who are listening or watching this, do get involved with BAME PlayStation. So they also partnered with Ukie to host this panel. It's an internal one, but we're trying to sort of reach out as much as we can throughout the industry, and hopefully over time we'll help move that needle along a little bit further.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, I want to give a giant shout out to BAME PlayStation, who've helped raise the game, not only make this event possible, but have really helped the journey. And definitely from my side, we're hoping that the future we can do more activities, both collaboratively and even if it's just shout outs, because the crew at BAME PlayStation are solid, and you should all check out their stuff once they become more and more known outside of PlayStation. So I really want to thank everyone. Thank you again. I'm just going to leave the room open for 5 minutes so people can access the networking link. But our panelists, please feel free to go if you like. I don't want you to stick around if you don't need to, but I want to thank everyone again and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It was
Thanks,
really
everyone.
lovely meeting you all. And yeah, thanks to all the audience as well for taking part. It was awesome.
Salam.